Hi, and welcome to a new episode of ESG Impact, the New Pioneers. Today's guest will be Adrien-Paul, so AP. He's Sustainability Specialist at Partners Group. Hi AP, how are you?
Hi Stefan, thank you for the invitation.
Really pleasure to host you. So could you give us a quick snapshot of your firm?
So Partners Group is a Swiss asset manager specialized in private markets. So we manage over 130 billion across 4 asset classes: so private equity, private infrastructure, private debt, and real estate. We have 20 offices around the world, so a very global firm. And my role, I'm part of the ESG and sustainability team. We're a team of 10 people globally, and we really have the aim to realize sustainability at scale, so integrate sustainability considerations throughout the entire investment process across the platform. So we build the tools, the processes, the frameworks, so that our investment professionals can apply ESG and sustainability considerations before we invest, pre-investment, but most importantly, as we are owners, right? Because that's Partners Group is an active owner, so we don't only invest into companies and passively allocate capital, but we actively build businesses and build better and more sustainable businesses.
That completely makes sense. And could you elaborate a little bit on your core philosophy in terms of ESG?
Yes, so we believe strongly in ESG and have been integrating ESG considerations for over 15 years into our investment processes. It's for us, ESG is a fundamental value creation aspect. So it's not only a thematic component, because Partners Group has a strong thematic angle. When we source and identify investment opportunities, we look at trends that create secular growth over the long term. And decarbonization and sustainability is, of course, one. So investing into the leaders of the low carbon economy. But more importantly, it's for us actually a value creation component when we own a business, right? So it's how can you transform a business, how can you decarbonize a business and build businesses that are more resilient because they also have positive environmental and social impact.
And in this context, how complicated was the implementation of SFDR? Were you able to solve the data collection problem?
Yes, so SFDR was very complex, and it is very complex. It's nothing straightforward. We have been collecting ESG data from our portfolio companies since years already. So I think we had a solid foundation as we started collecting data in 2018. Through surveys that we send our portfolio companies. And this is, of course, a very manual exercise, but we, over the past 2 to 3 years, we've ramped up our efforts in terms of data collection to be aligned with indicators that are required from a regulatory aspect. But of course, it's in the past we were less systematic. We are more systematic now. Now we really aim to collect GHG data or other ESG indicators from our portfolio companies since the first year of investment, right? Whereas in the past they had a bit more time. And so I think SFDR is a good framework because it aligns industry on common indicators and also our LPs, our investors, on what data they can expect from us in the future, transparency. But it's, of course, there was a lot of confusion or uncertainty in some dimensions which made the project challenging as well.
It resembles a little bit like the implementation of the AFMD, which in the beginning was a little bit complicated, and in the after, let's say the years after, it's paved the way to that growth story we have kind of witnessed over all the last years here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think now we're still in this phase where we as GPs, we are handling these new requirements from SFDR, but in a few years down the road, it will be something fully integrated in the annual fund reportings. The data, the indicators that we will report on will be really established, well known by the industry. So I think it just takes time because it's sustainability is such a complex topic, so multidimensional, and the requirements and focus areas are very different across stakeholders. So I think it just needs a bit of time for stakeholders to agree on which indicators they see as relevant. We've seen this also on the taxonomy side. So it's not that straightforward, but time will make it a success.
And so what kind of funds do you manage nowadays? Article 6, 8, 9, and could this classification kind of help you on the fundraising front?
Yes, so the topic of the SFDR disclosure of funds was a very intensely debated topic at our firm. I myself have done a lot of research on this field as well. I'm part-time also researcher at the University of Zurich and have written a paper on SFDR Article 9 funds, for example. And what's important to notice here is that SFDR is not a classification, right? It's a disclosure information. The market has made a classification out of it, but it was the intention at the start was to disclose information to investors, but not have a ranking or a classification. At Partners Group, we have taken the decision that funds with the final closing before March 2021, kind of from a ESG regulatory point of view, are kind of legacy funds that we have classified as or disclosed as SFDR Article 6, whereas newer investment vehicles and funds have been disclosed as SFDR Article 8 afterwards, right? Just from a portfolio and exit point of view, it just made more sense this way. And we have currently no fund that is disclosed as SFDR Article 9. And it was, of course, you know, from a fundraising perspective, we know and research shows it that if you label funds as being more sustainable as Article 9, then you can attract more funds. So from a fundraising perspective, it would have been beneficial to have an Article 9 fund, but for us, transparency was more important. And we, last year when we had these discussions internally, we thought that there was still a lot of uncertainty around Article 9, the requirements, the definition, what a sustainable investment is. So we said that we preferred to wait and not make the mistakes of disclosing a fund as Article 9 and then declassifying, as was the case afterwards. There were, especially on the public market side, also a huge wave of declassifications that we've seen, and this for us was really a no-go, something we wanted to avoid. So we said, okay, let's wait, be patient. As soon as we have more clarity on what is required as an Article 9 fund, we will then make a decision and potentially have a product as Article 9.
Seems like a wise decision to also wait and see, but to follow with curiosity what could be done, and in order then to also certainly avoid those kind of criticisms you could find around that greenwashing part, yes?
Yes, I mean, we saw 1 year ago, I think the topic was more prominent than it is today. In the impact investment space, a lot of investors really had as a hard requirement that they wanted Article 9 funds. And you know, there are some investors that said, well, for us, it's a must-have. We can only invest into certain strategy in the decarbonization or sustainability space if the fund is really disclosed as Article 9, because that shows the commitment of the GP. But for us, we think we wanted to preserve some kind of transparency and not make misstatements. And now we see that I think the market and the know-how of investors has increased in that space, and now investors don't see this so much as a hard requirement because they realize, well, there are some Article 8 funds that are very ambitious and maybe from their perspective more sustainable than some Article 9 funds that have maybe a bit of wider definition of what a sustainable investment is. So it's not, the distinction is not always that clear, and that's why it needs a certain level of flexibility from investors.
Okay, yeah, that makes really sense. Do you think that the ESG industry is moving fast enough? Do we need an extra mile?
The ESG industry is moving fast. Is it moving fast enough? the next years will tell. I think we've seen tremendous growth in the industry or the interest of investors over the past 3 years post-COVID. Also further strengthened by social movements. In Europe, the ESG movement is very much dominated by climate considerations, and I think the Fridays for Future movement has contributed significantly to this. In the US, the debate is more around DE&I, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, which was also strengthened by the Black Lives Matter movement. So now the question is, okay, will we continue on this pattern of in the past years exponential growth, which is needed, or, and that's maybe the risk, is that if there's too much greenwashing in the industry, then maybe some investors end up not believing in it anymore. So I think, and we are convinced that more will come, because decarbonization and sustainability is the trend, or one of the trends of the next decades. Just as digitization has been dominating the world over the past 2 to 3 decades, the next trend is sustainability, right? From a business point of view, if you're a company, you can not ignore this. Consumer preferences are changing. Consumers want to buy more sustainable products or products from more sustainable companies. So it makes our life easier, because our investment teams that maybe are not that passionate about the topic or are the business leaders of the companies that we invest in, today you can convince them with economics, right? You can tell, hey, demand for these products is increasing, so supply needs to increase and meet this demand. And we're convinced that more will come to support the capital that is needed, because it needs more capital from an allocation point of view, but also the transformation, right? Because I think there's a lot of excitement in our industry about how can we allocate more capital into new innovations, green tech, clean tech. But it's important to say there's a big part of the economy that we will not replace, right? The old economy is still going to exist, so we have to find a way to make the old economy more resource efficient, so to transform businesses, and that's a key angle of our ESG philosophy as well.
You mentioned also before your value creation model, so in which you have already embedded lots of ESG also. So how will you tackle those non-financial returns?
So yeah, I mean, we have a very systematic and strategic approach to ESG, right? We, as active owners, we invest into businesses. We are majority owners. We don't want to just passively engage with companies. So, we are private market investors, so we have the unique opportunity to actively transform businesses, right? And that's, I mean, it's an opportunity, but it's also a responsibility, because when you're invested into a publicly listed company, you can just, you can send an annual letter, you can meet the management, but your engagement effort is limited in a way, right? But we want to actively shape and drive changes and progress within the companies. So we really made a lot of efforts to enhance the companies, so independent of the region and the industry that a company operates in, we set minimum ESG standards that we expect our portfolio companies to achieve. So we launched last year our sustainability strategy, which was basically at portfolio level, 12 targets that we expect our portfolio companies to achieve during our ownership. So 4 on the environmental, 4 on the governance, and 4 on the social side. And these are really, for us, what it needs to build more resilient businesses, right? And because that's what we believe will help outperform in the long term. And then on top of this, of course, we encourage our companies to develop their own ESG journey, which tackles material aspects to them, right? Because every business has different topics that are material to them, right? But an industrial company has different focus areas than a software company or an infrastructure company. So we encourage our companies to develop a strategy that makes them an ESG leader in their space, take into consideration their materiality and which helps them basically improve their operations or offer more sustainable products and services to meet the growing demand.
This is exactly our favorite part, let's say, in that value creation model, how you then acquire those firms, you transform them, you implement lots of different things within those, and then afterwards you can then sell them, but that firm afterwards is really stronger.
Yes, exactly. And I think the key about the core aspect of our approach to this is that we are very systematic about it, right? You have to treat ESG just as any other business topic. You have to make it a board level agenda, and we like to say that ESG starts with the G at Partners Group, because in the sustainability strategy that we published last year, the first target that we expect our portfolio companies to achieve within the first 100 days of our ownership is that we want them to establish an ESG governance. So it sounds maybe abstract and conceptual, but what it means that we want our portfolio companies to define an ESG responsible at board level, at executive team level, and at operational management level. And this is, for us, it means that you have at every level of decision making an owner for the topic of sustainability, and it's like the backbone, which then allows to have a systematic and strategic approach to ESG, right? To drive and tackle progress on the environmental and the social dimension, and go away from this anecdotal, sporadic, changing light bulbs, having a vegetarian meal on Fridays,
Exactly.
all these
I understand
initiatives are good, but it's always, in the past, it was very much like a bit was done, but there was no clear strategy, no clear owner, right? And for every other business topic, you have clear ownership. You have someone at every level who has to feel responsible for it, who has to have his or her compensation linked to this topic, right? So that's, I think, the key driver to make ESG, a non-financial topic, as rigorous, as disciplined, and as strategic as any other financial topic.
Wow, that's really, I think I love really that ESG governance concept. And now let's move then to the concrete examples. Could you share with us, 4 or 5 examples which you have implemented either within Partners Group, the headquarters, the Lux entity, and also your different portfolio companies?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think our sustainability strategy that I've mentioned before is a key milestone, because it's very concrete in the targets that we expect from our portfolio companies and from the business leaders. So I'll bring some portfolio examples in a minute, but let's stay for another minute on the conceptual side. It's, for example, on the environmental side. I explained ESG starts with the G on the governance side. Let's move to the environmental side. What do we expect here from our portfolio companies? The companies or the space that we invest in is kind of the mid-market, upper mid-market space. So companies that have often never actually reflected on their ESG journey. They have not measured their carbon footprint. They don't have a D&I policy. So you have to start with very simple things. On the environmental side, we expect our portfolio companies in the first year of our ownership to measure their GHG footprint. In the second year, to get an assurance on this footprint, so that we know that the data is reliable, and so that with this data we can then develop a decarbonization strategy tailored to this business in the third year. And this strategy then has, of course, the objective of net zero, so Paris Agreement objectives, but also intermediate targets, right? 50% reduction and 20% reduction during our ownership already. So that's how we lead our assets on their path to net zero. And what's important is when we announced these targets, it's always easy to commit. All companies are world champions in pledging, making public announcements, but how do we concretely help our companies then, right? Because you have these companies told us, well, it's clear what we have to do. They then challenged with, how do we measure this GHG footprint that you expect from us? We don't have the expertise. It's still a very abstract topic for them. So what we did, because we don't have the capacity when you're an investor with 130 billion assets under management to go through company by company and help them. So we needed to find a scalable solution. So we launched a strategic partnership with a consulting firm to develop a GHG playbook so that every time we invest into a portfolio company, we say, hey, do you know how to measure your GHG footprint? If not, well, here's our partner, a consulting firm, and they know what we expect. We've developed a playbook, they can help you. And that really helps us then to realize a GHG footprint and then a decarbonization strategy across our portfolio, right? And of course, then the next step is to work with our portfolio companies on what is really material to them, right? So we've invested in, I think you know Schleich, the German plastic toy manufacturer. Yes. We've worked with them. What is material for them? It's the use of plastics, right? So developing the sustainable toys of the future with the use of biodegradable plastic, right? But it's also in our infrastructure portfolio. You know, you invest into assets that are green, that produce renewable energy, but they still can become more sustainable from an operational point of view, right? So you work with them then on measuring their own footprint, right? Because we expect it from all our portfolio companies. So working on their supply chain, how do they source materials? On health and safety, right? Health and safety is a key strategic topic also for Partners Group, because for us it's on the infrastructure side, it's something that creates a lot of cost, a lot of incidents. So this is a very straightforward value creation instrument, right? If you establish health and safety standards across sites at infrastructure projects or industrial companies, you can improve health and safety of employees, reduce turnover rates, save costs, and drive also the financial performance of the business, right? So these were great initiatives on the portfolio side. For us as a corporate, we also try to adhere to the highest standards, right? Because we need to be a credible partner for our portfolio companies. So 2 years ago, we were included in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, which is an index of a bit more than 300 publicly listed companies with most corporate sustainability leaders. And we have learned a lot about how, what we do with our employees, how we can decarbonize our business, and just this approach, this governance around the topic of sustainability is something that we can pass on to our companies. And for example, for how we go along with our carbon footprint, we've invested into nature-based solutions to compensate our emissions. Last year, we've invested into Climeworks, direct air capture business in Switzerland. And this year we've signed a contract with them, so a 13-year contract to compensate or capture our emissions. So this is also a way to invest into technology-based solutions and drive innovation in the space as a portfolio company, the investment, but also as a commitment as corporate.
Again, a very personalized and robust process here.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we try to walk the talk and apply to ourselves what we expect our companies to do, what we expect the clients of our companies to do, and contribute together to these efforts.
Another common denominator. Thanks a lot, AP, for sharing all your insights. It was really a pleasure to host you.
Thank you, Stefan.